Thank you for coming to today's Roads to Research session. Roads to Research is brought to us by the Tri-Council Research Support Fund, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Brian White on his presentation on anthropogenic change on the summit of Southeast Asia, a 12-year perspective.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I just turn this light down a bit? Okay. Let's see, how's this? None of this works. Oh, look at that. Is that better? Just a minute. Can you turn them right down? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, turn them all right down. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Perfect. Okay, so just a little bit of background on this. If anyone wants a copy of this, I've got a printed version which will hopefully get submitted to a publication in the next little while. The last 12 years I've been working with Jeff Bird and in Southeast Asia, particularly in Vietnam. And over the time, my particular interest there shifted from being involved with pro-poor tourism and working with the Hill Tribe people over towards working with the Huang Lin Son National Park. And that came about because of a personal interest in rhododendrons and plants, and particularly cloud forest plants. And that occupied the last, 10 years of my work in Vietnam. So the focus was on the mountain you see behind you. People don't realize that there's mountains this big in Southeast Asia, and they're a very impressive place. This is Mount Fansipan, and it's right close to the Chinese border, and it's a very significant location in terms of what it has to offer in terms of plant diversity. It's also a very important place in terms of the historical background of Vietnam, particularly in terms of its relationship to Ho Chi Minh. So I'll talk about that later on. So what we're going to be looking at, we're going to have a look at geological history. Something about that is fascinating. My background, I'm a geographer, okay? So I did tons of physical geography, although I didn't like it much at the time. I'm mostly a human geographer, and I focus particularly on cultural transformation of landscape as a result of cultural involvement. So we'll look at that. We'll look at climate shifts, and they're really profound, but I have no data on it because it hasn't been collected. But I've really noticed it over the last 10, 15 years. The climate there is getting colder, okay? Colder and drier in the summer. So very, very interesting shift, has profound implications for what can be grown there, particularly in terms of rice crops. And then we're going to take a look at anthropogenic impacts, particularly construction, forest harvesting, tourism, economic development and poverty alleviation, and how those things have played out. So those are elements that we're going to be looking at in this presentation. A little bit of history on this. We launched the Huang Lin project in 2004. This is researching mostly biodiversity protection, firefighting techniques, and we'll talk about that in a little while, conservation strategies, and we came up with a number of very significant plans which were implemented. So some of the things that happened there I'm very proud of, because my partner, Dr. Peter Wharton, who was UBC Botanical Garden curator at the time, and I made a difference in protecting big chunks of this area from further exploitation or damage. So this was a partnership, first of all, with Capilano College and Botanical Gardens, UBC, and later on with Royal Roads and with UBC Botanical Gardens. Incidentally, I had three graduate students from Royal Roads helping me in these projects, and I'll introduce them as we go along. So, where are we? Well, pretty straightforward. There it is, if you can see it. Where's this little button thing? Is that it? Oh, no, that's not it. Oh, there we are. Okay. Sapa. So technologically advanced. So it's Dien Bien Phu, some of you might remember, important battle during the French occupation of the area. Hanoi is here, and for many years you take the overnight train up to Sapa, which is a resort town up here, which used to be a French hill station to get away from the heat of Hanoi in the summertime. So that's where we've been going back. The Red River runs up here and up into China and on up. To look a little bit closer, the density of the population should have been indicated by the number of villages you can see here. It's quite impressive. And you can see that the Chinese border is here. And there's this area in here, which has been so interesting to botanists in the last few years. This is not explored significantly. Fansipan is 3,143 meters. It's a really, really big mountain. Sapa is right across the valley here. So what you come up to is the station here. The old French Blue Line used to run all the way up to into Yunnan, through here and down to Hanoi. And they recently put in a new big highway all the way down to Hanoi here. And of course, that's profoundly changed the whole atmosphere and circumstances of Sapa as a destination. So why would I be interested in this? Well, I've always been a mountaineer. All my life, I'm not so much now. The best I can do is East Soup Park, a couple of hills there, and that's about as far as I get. But this is really profound. This is also granite, okay? And this here is mostly limestone. So it's surface drainage, which is critically important instead of a lot of underground caves and karst. So you've got amazing plant diversity. It's never been glaciated in something like 30 million years, okay? So it's had years and years and years of plant evolution, which is a really significant point. So plant diversity is the most, plant diversity of the temperate zone is on this ridge between 2,000 and 3,000 meters. It's unbelievable. There's something like 10 times the plant diversity that what we have in Canada. Absolutely fantastic. National holds 25% of Vietnam's endemic species, unique species, including a whole bunch of very, very rare conifers. So it's a really interesting place to go if you're interested in this kind of stuff, right? Otherwise, it's really boring. Okay. So what's it like? Well, it's granite. It's starting to dry out. So the place is drying out. You go in there and think, oh my God, what's happened? And I was up there and I said, well, there's no primulas and gesneriads here. Gesneriads are like African violets things, right? So they've all gone. They've all disappeared until you get really high up. I'm saying, what the hell's happened? And the other thing is it froze. Everything froze. They had 2 feet of snow up there. What? Huh? So all of a sudden, you've got this big climatic change going on, which has substantially altered the opportunities in there for the existing plants and also for other kinds of things, such as cardamom production. So it's a very unusual situation. You can see how peaky it is. That's all eroded granite. So that in itself is probably the most important element in this particular landscape. Also, you might have noticed that it's not particularly accessible, right? Like it's like this. So that protects a lot of the plants, and it's the same on the other side of the border as well. So there it is. There's the ridge. And for many years, I'd happily tramp along up here. Oh, joy, happiness is, right? You wander along up here. And of course, you're at that height. You've got incredibly steep side hills and circumstances that you have to deal with. And you might have noticed, see in here, there's a big kind of bare patch, all full of bamboo. Why? Well, lightning. It gets hit by lightning all the time, particularly in the dry season now. You're getting big patches all along the hillside, here as well, here, all the way up, where lightning is struck. If it hits at the top of the hill, no problem, it just burns and goes away. If it hits lower down, you have a fire lower down, the whole hillside goes up. Then you've got a problem. There's nothing worse than being caught in a bamboo forest fire. It's bad because they've got hollow stems, and they explode and they send little slivers right through you. A bad scene. So what we've got now, we've got 30,000 hectares, 11,800 are strictly protected, so no one can go in there, including us when we went up there and found to our horror they wouldn't let us in. And 17,900 ecological recovery, which is kind of a dodgy point because not much is being recovered, and then a buffer zone of 38,000. So a lot of these areas are open for harvesting and exploitation by the local hill tribes, and that's an issue which is some concern. Species compression. What has happened in this area, which is really interesting, it happened here too, was that as you had glaciation arise and go away again, you had this changing climate over the years, the tops of the mountains here acted as kind of a refugia for plants. So as it got colder and drier, all the plants there would, as it got colder and drier, they would tend to move, they would move up and down the hillside like this. So when it got wet again, things would expand, and warmer, it would expand down and up and down hundreds of times, okay, like this over centuries. What that did is result in a situation of rapid adaptation and the development of a lot of endemic species because of the compression of the zones into which people live. So you get on the top of the mountain, and you'll find things like a schefflera, which you'll see as a house plant here, growing wild under 2 feet of snow. And that's because of this compression factor and the fact that the tropical plants moved up the hill. Also, there's a thing called, there's interspecific plants there, of which I brought back some. There's a whole bunch of them in my backyard, which I'll be introducing here shortly. And these are plants which are in between two species, and that happens in rhododendrons and a couple of other areas. So you've got this compression, you've got a very unusual situation, you've got plant variations like crazy going on in this area, and that's why it's so interesting to people who are botanists. It's got many areas which are very inaccessible. Look at this. This is sitting on top of the mountain, looking out across the Huanglen Range, and a lot of this is in the park. It's very hard to get to these places. Even if you're a very resilient hill tribe person, you can't actually get there without a huge amount of effort. We tried it a couple of times, going off the trail and trying to cut across country. No, it's incredibly dense and very difficult to get through. So that gives you a sense of what the landscape is like. It's really, really magical. It's powerful. It has enormous personal meaning to me because I've been up there. I climbed the mountain 5 times now. Well, okay, once on a sky ride. Okay, but you get the idea. So, and meanwhile, what happened to Sapa? Well, it's considerably more congested than it used to be because of the road opening up to Chinese tourists, which had not been much the case before, and also massive construction. Jeff, you'll be interested to know that this is the new market. And it's huge and it's empty. There's nobody home because it's too expensive for people to move in there, so they're all now out in the street, and the market is mostly not occupied. So somebody who was an entrepreneur came in there, built this thing, and it hasn't worked out very well. In the past, people didn't have scooters. Now everyone has at least my impression is they have 2, but actually there's a bicycle, look at that. But otherwise, everyone has these scooters which are endemic and ubiquitous all the way through Vietnam. So that has become a significant change for a lot of the hill tribes. A lot of the villages we visited on the trip, everyone, these were much more in evidence than they used to be. And finally, here we are. We're at the base camp, and if you're going to have a sky ride, it makes perfect sense to build a large Confucian temple at the beginning of the sky ride, right? Okay, so there it is. We have this large Confucian temple, and this is our team looking out in wonderment at this particular temple. They've got to build an identical one at the top as well. Okay, so this resulted in a substantial amount of leveling of the landscape, collecting of rocks and everything else, and we'll come to that in a little while. In the meantime, this is the Fansipan legend, and this goes up to the top of Fansipan. It's very fast, it's very efficient. It's the longest tram in the world. It takes 27 minutes to get up there. That's a long time. Really, really quite spectacular, and it cost a few $1 billion to build. So we'll come back to that in a little while. In the meantime, I'm just going to show you exactly where the actual tram is. It goes from here up to here, and the summit is just a little further on. So it doesn't occupy that much of the park. This is an exaggerated snapshot of the northern part of the park. Trin Trom Pass is a pass we used to go up when we were climbing in. It's about 2,000 meters. Oh, no, sorry, 1,500, 1,600 meters. And now, of course, you go up to the top, and then you walk down. There is a spot of bother if you take a tram from just under 1,000 meters up to the top in one go, because all of a sudden your heart starts doing this. Start doing this, right? And if you happen to be in your 70s or 80s, as many of the people going up there do, this does result in a certain mortality rate. So we have people dying fairly regularly, but they feel they're in the right place because it has kind of a sense of a national icon. Okay, so I'm rationalizing, but you get the general idea. So once again, another shot of where the tram is. There's the top of Fansipan, there it is. It cuts across this large valley, and it's in this valley that we had Sapa is over here in this area, but in this valley is where we had villages that Jeff had worked in for several years with students in terms of pro-poor tourism, and that's quite a very successful operation, which had led to an award for that project from the Asia Pacific Tourism Association just recently. So that gives you a sense. This is obviously highly exaggerated. I've exaggerated this to show the difference, but I want to point out one thing. This is all green, and if you look on both sides, it's not. And that's because of ladang agriculture, slash and burn on the upper hillsides. They've also been putting in a big dam in here recently, and because they're trying to develop hydroelectric capacity in Vietnam. And of course, that has had some impact on the site as well. Most of the time, in the past years, I go out from the Cat village and go up into the mountains and go up along here like this and then out this way. So that's kind of a snapshot of the place. This is the way it looks from an ecological point of view. Subtropical montane lower down, upper subtropical montane evergreen forests, and then the elfin cloud forest is right up at the top here. So it roughly runs like this. It goes up and down quite a bit according to exposure, but that's basically what we're looking at. And this is where the concentration of unique plants happens to be. So what we've done? Well, my particular interest now is I wanted to look at what the expanding population and tourist development had impacted in terms of the park. That's what I was actually looking at. The second thing I wanted to look at, and it's not actually mentioned here because I don't have any data that I can actually point to, is climate change. But I've got some observations about it, which I think are quite significant, and they'll have significance for this whole region. So this, you'll remember this one, Jeff. There we are. This is the red dhow, and our colleague from Hanoi Open University working on some of the projects that we had in this particular park. So that's where it all started, and it went for several years. It's still going strong with Capilano. And once again, Jeff got this going. A very interesting project, and we involved, I know, many students and faculty involved in this one. It was a very successful project. Then what I started up doing was working with a Royal Roads graduate and a previous Cap College graduate, Scott Back, this gentleman here. And there's Mark's name, you know. They're still out there. I mean, it's hard to believe, but yes, there we are. Yeah, they're still there. And what we were talking about here is two things. One is conservation area allocation, which was the responsibility of the late Peter Wharton, this gentleman here. And a very good friend of mine. We did a lot of exploration together. He died, unfortunately, of pancreatic cancer about 5 years ago. And the subject which has been presented by Scott, oh, geez. Back, hack. Oh, there we are, okay. No, one more. That's it, sorry. Scott Back is fire suppression. And he came from BC Provincial Parks, and he was talking about the way of suppressing fires. Suppressing fires in bamboo forests. So one of the projects we had was to fundraise to get chainsaws, specialized chainsaws to actually go in there and fight some of the fires. Bamboo fires are lethal. They're going to damage the whole thing amazingly. So there we are. So, yes, okay, and here's, stop, no, heck, okay. That's it. So here's Scott working, and we're working with some of the projects. And what we're doing here is we're laying out, in this particular case, laying out some of the fire suppression elements which we wanted to put in place in terms of zoning it and organizing it so they can actually fight the fires. There's a huge area of bamboo there, particularly in the limestone over towards Trintron Pass. Really serious problem. They've had a couple of bad fires up recently in the Cat Valley, and those are really having a significant effect on the number of people they're allowing in there as tourists. This is a project we worked on. We recommended a new trail down to the old hydroelectric station, and we said, yeah, sure, they'll never do it. We came back the next year, and there it is. I said, oh my God, they listened to us. No. Okay, so they did that. They also put in the conservation zones and various other things. The other thing is that, you know, the Vietnamese have got particular things that, oh, geez, why is it doing that? Oh, I see. They have a whole thing about, they have a real thing about railings. And you can see those are concrete railings. And they actually put those all the way up to the top of the mountain on one side. They've all rotted away now. They didn't do a very good job of it, I suppose. But it does indicate. Also, take a look at the paving that they put in. It's absolutely fantastic. And this is the local commissar wearing his Vietnam hat. And super nice guy. But they were absolutely keen to do it. The other thing is all on the side is planted with indigo. Okay, so which is a major cash crop up there. There's the mob, ready to go out on a field trip here. Quite exciting experience. Some of these folks we got to know very well. We worked with them several years. I was still working with them when I was up there last time. So, and there's us ready to head out in freezing, bloody cold weather. Yeah, so there we are. And this is a combination of some of the park naturalists and staff, Sarah and Peter Wharton, and Scott Back. And interesting trip. And this is going from Trin Tron Pass up. These are our porters. Now, I just want to talk about this because it sounds awfully colonial. Oh, gosh, follow me, chaps, up into the mountains, you know, type of thing. What we found was that a lot of the porters, we worked with the same folks for several years, and what it did is it balanced out a peculiar gender imbalance in the community. The men had always done a lot of the actual heavy work around putting rice paddies in, and because of the decline in rice production, they're now getting subsidized rice. And what the men were doing is they switched over to doing a lot of these kinds of activities of going in and providing porterage and support. So as a matter of fact, it was a means of maintaining that. As the women got more and more involved in guiding and learning languages, then the balance of power in the communities changed towards the women getting more involved in having the money, especially the grandmothers, right? And this has resulted in some interesting situations in the communities there. It depended because each community has a different kind of gender balance and gender responsibilities. So the Red Zao, there was a lot more power for the women for a longer period of time than there would have been, say, with the Black Hmong or the Flower Hmong. A very interesting thing. I'm not delving into it too much, but it was certainly a significant factor. Okay, so Melissa Tupper, a graduate from Royal Roads in Environment. She's now a senior person with the World Wildlife Fund. And this is what was directly under the pathway going up to the top of the mountain. This is right directly where the actual Fantapan legend actually goes, right overhead of this. It was absolutely incredibly steep, straight up. And it was called the Sin Chai route. And it was on this route that I found some of the rarest rhododendrons, which I'm presently growing on. And these are interspecific ones. They're between two different species, and will probably end up being identified as a new species. I've got 3 of them in the garden right now. So this is it. One of the great things about this, we also, after Avatar came out, I thought, my God, it's just like this. Because as you go up there, it's just like going, remember they're going up into the floating islands, right? Okay, they're going up and it's really steep. There's lots of lianas and things like this. You climb up. This was the same thing. When you got to the top, when you actually got up to the bits you can see at the top there. Oh, this doesn't go crazy. Oh, here we are. This bit up in here, it goes up and you got it. You actually ended up going up here. Once you got onto here, this is actually a large round knob, which has evolved over millions of years on top of a very narrow, steep bit like this. So when you go up it, it's frays, it goes from side to side like this. You put a step down of it, it goes, whoa, whoa, like this all the way up. And if you want to collect seed off a rhododendron which is hanging up there, you know, hang on to here and you've got to hang on to it and get it. And all of a sudden, the whole thing starts to go like this. You know, oh my God, you get back over here again. It's really exciting, yes. Well, I got the seed, you know. Okay, at the end of the day, you go in there and you use plant presses, and what we're doing is labeling and collecting DNA to send back to Edinburgh and to Kew, and we're labeling plants, rhododendrons in these cases, and putting them aside. So that took a lot of time. We had these great stacks of this material back with us on the trip. It was very, very interesting. And discovering new species at this time is, wow, how cool is this? What's this? I don't know. It looks like rhododendron roxyanum. Yeah, no, it's not. It's got this. I don't know. It's got these big fights going on all the time about what things were. So I'm still waiting to hear them back. This is what it looks like up on the top. The rhododendrons at this is in March, and there wasn't many out at this time, but you get a general idea. This would be just covered in different types of rhododendrons. This one here is Rhododendron Sino-Faulkneri, which has huge yellow flowers about this big around. It gets to be 70 feet tall, lower down, and has trunks on it like this. It's just amazing. It's really cool. And if you look over, you can see that the whole place is like this. It's all this massive, these great alpenhorns and peaks and valleys and so on. It's just an amazing, rich forest of dense plants. Rhododendron latuche, I've got that in my garden. It's a lower species. In this case, it's growing down among the palms. Absolutely magnificent plant. Going to bore you with lots of plants. Okay, I'll bore you with this one. This is Rhododendron valentinianum, which is intensely scented. It's a very strong scent. It's really cool. And Collagene unionensis, a very rare plant. It's now been propagated. The way that they're paying for the park, the total park was 42 staff, and they had the place. They had $36,000 US a year to run the park. Okay, that was it. So what they did is they did a partnership with an American woman working out of the Yunnan, and they set up a meristem culture organization there to develop orchids and sell them back to the Chinese. And that's what supports the park, is the meristem culture. I thought, how creative can you get? So very interesting. This is one of the things they're selling. You know about primulas. This is Primula chipensis, very rare. You'll never see this anywhere else. Very crinkly looking leaves and absolutely spectacular flowers. Really cool. And this is where they've got all of their plants. I'm afraid it's a fairly fuzzy picture, but this is important. These have all been confiscated from hill tribe people who have been trying to sell them in the market, right? So they get the stuff, they cut down the trees, they get the orchids, they go in and confiscate them, then they use them to propagate through using meristem culture. Okay, and there it is, meristem. I couldn't believe when I saw this, and it's huge. It's a huge operation. This goes back a few years. That's Melissa Hingston, along with our Black Hmong porters and guide. And we're on top of the original top of Fansipan, waving the Vietnamese flag. And just down over here, there was a little shrine to Ho Chi Minh. Okay, fascinating place. Ho Chi Minh talked about Fansipan climbing it himself when he was in the depths of the war against the I can't think if it was the French or the Americans, and he talked about how important it was to be there and to be able to look out and see Vietnam below him. Very, very interesting, and of course that's become a bit of a national shrine for Vietnamese, especially those that lived through the war. And there's our trusty folks, Scott and Melissa, up on top of the mountain, back in days before it got kind of creamed. And we had a good time. I do notice that we do seem to have similar hairlines in this picture. Scott blames me for this. He says that I caused it, but I don't think that's really true. So this is what it looks like now. And that's where we were sitting, is just up on that top of that rock there. And this is what's at the base of the tram, the Confucian temple. Because it's Confucian, because it's funded mostly by Chinese investment. There's you can look down into the valley, you can see the clear line of the edge of the rice paddies along the bottom there, and going up. The reason it's so foggy is because of burning off the rice fields at this time of year. There we are going up. On the right-hand side, there's Andy Hill, who's a graduate student from here. And that's what's happened to that's the Sinchai route right there. That's exactly where we were. We went right up here. It's like really steep, you can see. And it's all been torn off. Like all of the hanging plants and everything else are gone. And this was used to drag things up and down. So that's really done it in. It's not like a huge area of the whole park, to be honest. but it has significantly changed the atmosphere and the character of the place. There it is again. You can see how steep it is. It's really steep. And you might see that there's actually two lifts here. There's one here, and then this is the one which is the service one that takes all of the service equipment up to the top of the mountain. Looking down the valley, this gives you a sense of the density of land use in the valley here. It's quite significant. One of the things I think is important to point out is that recently the Vietnamese government has been putting in schools. There's one there. And the schools and electrification and road systems have expanded over the last 10 years very, very substantially. So now a lot of the people are now learning Vietnamese, where in the past they didn't have Vietnamese education systems. So as you can see there, you've got, once again, very foggy, but still, it's a high density of population in this area. There are 63 million people in Vietnam. A lot of them live in villages, in small towns. And of course, that's why the original project got going, was to provide some support and opportunities for the villagers to actually get involved in tourism and get some more of an income. Okay, this is the top. And of course, the convenient thing is that if you have a large facility at the top like this, if you chuck all your garbage over the side, nobody inside can see it. Okay, so that's what they did. Now, we were assured that this would all get cleaned up later on. So I hope it does. It's quite possible that they will. The Vietnamese, when they say they're going to do something, they do it. They get around to it, which I've always really admired them for that. And if you see here, there's also a track that goes all the way up to the top up here. Like this, there's a big staircase going up, and there's a temple been built in here. So it's quite substantial. This is a really big deal. And of course, if you take a look, you can see that there's you can see the track here for power lines. So there's additional power lines going in, and then going down here is another track, 2 tracks for the sky ride. Okay, that's what it looks like from the top now. This is the top terminal here, and this is the constructions that are going in for coming up to the top up here. So there's a big stairway that's going in, which is made of limestone. And that's actually problematical because this is a very acidic environment based around limestone was actually banned, and we actually got them to take out a limestone path because it was interfering with the chemical balance of the trails in a sensitive area. Now they put in limestone everywhere. So that's an issue. Up over here you can see that this is the path that goes up and over the top, and down on the other side of this part here is where the accommodation is for people who are doing hikes. That's what they have done to the top. So you can see here, you can see the pathway up to the summit. That's where we had the picture of up here. And then you can see here that there's a trail that comes all the way down to the spot where the actual tramway ends. So they had to level the whole thing to actually get enough material at the top to actually build it. So here's the pathway that goes up. And I'll tell you, I was sucking air going up this because I'd gone straight up from 10,000 feet. Like this. Boy, I tell you, I wasn't feeling so good. However, how many hundreds and hundreds of people have been working on this? Hundreds of field tribe people have been hired as laborers on this project. Hundreds. Okay? So it's produced a ton of money. Okay? You want to buy a scooter? Hey, get a job up here for a few weeks and you got yourself a scooter. That's a big deal. So it has had a lot to do with poverty alleviation. I'll come to that in a little while. I think it's an important point. Anyway, look at all this limestone stuff that they put in. It's pretty scary. There it is looking back across at the peaks, which no one's ever going to get to, I don't think. And around there, we have this, a rundia bamboo at the end of its life cycle. Now, those of you know about bamboo, some of it lives up to 100 or even over 100 years, and then it dies, right? And then it sprouts up again. Now, put this all around that last set of pictures, and you have a whole hillside covered in dead or dying bamboo, all nice and dry, and ready to go up at a moment's notice if there's a big strike. So there's a big fire hazard up here. We pointed this out, and of course with the kind of development they've done, they don't actually seem to be responding to that particular point. But this is actually a very, very serious problem. When you're actually going up to here, there's a wind blowing here constantly. the clattering and the noise is amazing. It's just this constant, like a roar all the time, because the bamboo is about this big around, right? So a very interesting situation. If you go down, they built, when I was first up there, this building here, we had recommended a ranger station going in, and it was made out of bamboo with tarps, and that was it. And there was another one down here, there was a cafe, which was bamboo with tarps. This hasn't actually improved much. Now they've got accommodation overnight for hiking here and here. So this is some distance away from the previous shots, but still, once again, it does represent a bit of an impact. This is the nicest spot I've seen for a ranger's cabin. It's just beautiful. Looking out over, once again, a very, very steep hillside going up there. The actual route up is just, the actual sky ride up is just on the other side of this ridge here. It goes up over here. So you can, once again, you can see this well-constructed pathways that come in. And remember, all of this stuff is lugged up on the backs of porters, okay? All comes up the skyway and comes down. And that is the station at the very top in a particularly beautiful area, which has got the highest concentration of botanical interest anywhere on the whole place. So that's gone in. It looks pretty good. I'm actually very impressed with it. It was all helicoptered in, didn't create a lot of damage. It's probably the best single piece of construction that I've seen up there. Once again, you're up in the cloud forest. You're up in the complex of a number of different species, rhododendrons, magnolias. There's quite a few different types of rowan trees or mountain ash. There's many different types of density of species up here is just incredible. It's just a huge range. There's a thing called the stone oak, and so on. So I won't go into a lot of details on that, but it's something I find absolutely fascinating. And once again, I pointed out previously the burned area. See this? When I was up there many years ago with Peter, we had a lightning strike. We were in the middle of a lightning storm, and very exciting time, freaking out all over the place and heavy rain. And then we looked up, and when it flashed, you could see the outline of all the propane tanks, which were stacked along the side of our tent. Which I thought, holy crap! Oh my God! Quick! Okay, up, jump up, get these, put them down near the porter's tent, you bastards! And there it is. So the other thing to recognize, you see all this bamboo. Well, if you ever see millions of years of bamboo growing, it tends to build up this thick black soil. It's just fabulous. And I couldn't understand, how do rhododendrons grow in this? I found out something really important. The rhododendrons grow on rocks which are exposed as epiphytes. They just sit there, as lithophytes, right? And the roots grow down like this, and it takes 2 or 3, 4, 5 years before they actually hit the black soil. And they actually grow as an epiphyte for several years, and that's why we could never grow any of these rhododendrons. So once I figured that out, I didn't give the plants any nutrients at all, and bungo, off we go. We got rhododendrons. Yeah, I'm going to sell that to somebody one of these days. This is the cloud forest. This is what it looks like when you're up there. It's magical. It's like really, really mystical, really cool. So up in the trees, you've got epiphytes. You've got, for example, up in here, this is rhododendrons. These are rhododendrons. They grow up in the trees as an epiphyte. And then very often, instead of growing up, they grow down. You're walking along, oh, there's a rhododendron. Oh, it's coming from up there. Very, very interesting. And a lot of those plants are known here and have been hybridized for use in gardens here. This is Rhododendron sino-faulkneri. This plant here is probably hundreds of years old, hundreds. And it has flowers which, each head of each, there's maybe 16, 17 plants in a truss, and each one is as big as my fist. It's huge, and it's beautiful. It's scented. It's really lovely. And there are thousands of these scattered across the mountainside, mixed in with the bamboo. And this is the one that I noticed grew as an epiphyte. It's a very interesting plant. So there it is. There's another one of the collagenes. They're quite common in the area there. But now let's have a look at, once again, camped in the cloud forest. I must admit, this is actually not on Fansipan. After we went up there and got thoroughly depressed, we went off to Yai, and we went up there instead, which was pretty cool and untouched, pretty much. So that was kind of a morale boost for all of us. But anyway, we're out there in the cloud forest. This is what it looks like. It's high. It's lots of epiphytes up in the trees. And you get the, the fog sloping in. Very, very interesting and beautiful place. That's the cloud forest. That's what it looks like up on the top. And you see how steep it is? And you might notice something interesting. Along the ridge here, this is a group of very, very ancient and very unique endemic conifers. They only grow on these ridges in this park. That's it. So that's important. You've got mountain ash here and a number of other mixed trees in the area. I won't go into them all, but there are dozens and dozens and dozens of really beautiful trees in this park, and they're all spectacular, and almost all of them have flowers. So it's pretty cool. Now let's get on to a particular interest here, and that's cardamom. How many use cardamom? Anyone? Okay, now you get a chance to see what it looks like. Okay, so this is cardamom, and it's these large berries or nuts. This is the flower, which is huge. It's about this big around. And the whole area, the Hilltribe people have been given permission to go in, and in many cases, the whole village is supported of two big bags of cardamom a year delivered. And they're delivered to these folks here, who are the middlemen, who sort and sell the cardamom. And this is black cardamom, which means it's been smoked. So when you get it here, it's mostly green. It hasn't been smoked. But in Asia, this is more popular and more valuable. So the cardamom is harvested. It's smoked. This is split open. The nuts are taken out. The cardamom is a plant about this tall. It goes up in big sprays. And then it's sold in the marketplace and distributed. What's happened recently is the Chinese have gone into mass production of cardamom across the border in Yunnan and undercut the price of cardamom in this area here. So what they've done is, rather than do anything else, they've expanded the cardamom production, right, further and further up the hill, because at the same time the Chinese did this, they put in cardamom which is more and more frost resistant. So it's a double whammy. And this is the way it gets smoked. This is a smoking facility here. The fire's lit down here. It's all laid out above here. And this is what happens when you want to clear a cardamom plantation. Here's cardamom here, and we're cutting down the trees all the way through here to give about a 40% cover above. So about 60% of the trees are cut down so they could grow more cardamom. It's not absolutely devastating, but it's very damaging. So that's what's going on at the moment. Once again, you can see up in the trees here, you can see the epiphytes growing all the way through here. Okay, this is what we call Gesneriad Gully. This was the most miserable, brutal, awful, cold, wet trip I've ever had. It was horrible, okay? But going up there, you go up through this gully and it's just bucketing down, and you look around, the place is full of these little tiny plants, like that primula I showed you, small plants with basically looking like African violets. And there's lots and lots of them all over the place, right? And ferns and primulas and all kinds of these little plants, which I'm really fascinated by because I never grew out of it, okay? So, you go up through this dense jungle, and you work your way up, and it's not much of a trail. As you can see, it's a terrible trail. Oops. Oh, damn. That's what it looks like now. It's been planted with cardamom, as you can see here, and the cardamom has died. See this? It's all dead from the frost. And so the whole gully is dried out. The cardamom has taken it over. They've been bringing water buffaloes in here, which has really eroded this trail. And what you've got there is a lot of dead orchids and other plants there because the place is drying out. It's getting dry. It cannot handle the dry summers anymore. And it can't handle the cold winters. And I suspect this is various variations on this have gone on for a long time. Here's some of our colleagues coming down another trail, which has just been cut. What happened is when we're up on the top, see him with his plant collecting tool here, see this? Whoops, damn. Oops. Oh, come on. Now what's happened? Oh. Sorry. Delicate device. Anyway, what you can see, he's got a plant collecting tool there, and the trail itself is the result of significant erosion from water buffaloes and various other things going up. Now, you'd be surprised where you can get a water buffalo into. It's quite something. They don't like it, but they go anyway. Okay, so once again, this is the campsite that we were in. This is one of our main campsites, and which I've camped at for many, many years. This is about 5 years ago, well, 10 years ago, I guess. That's what it looks like now. It's just been trashed, and it's because everything's dead. Everything froze to death. You see all the cardamom is dead. See this? And that's the same place, same location. Absolutely incredible. Well, I was really surprised. The other thing is a lot of the trees have lost their epiphytic cover, so the epiphytes have all died. Illegal logging. Now, let's say, just for the sake of argument, that you've actually worked up there, your family's worked up there, and you have money for the first time ever in a substantial amount, more so than you've ever seen before. What are you going to buy? Right, a chainsaw. Okay. And better yet, let's get a chainsaw and let's get a Yukon, like the local rigs you can get there to actually make boards. Okay? So all of a sudden, here you are in the middle of a dead cardamom plantation doing illegal logging. Okay? And you're cutting everything down, and you've got your water buffalo there to drag everything out. Hell of a deal. Okay, you're making money. You're doing fine. So in terms of poverty alleviation, fantastic. Great, love it. Environmental protection, not so good. So if you get a lot of people doing this, you're going to run into another thing. There's also, you probably know, there's not much in the way of population control there, and lots of people can move into this area quite freely. So that's another issue. So we're getting an increased demand. So I'm getting into my conclusions now. What do we got? Well, there's localized landscape and vegetative destruction. That's evident. All over the place, there's a significant amount of that going on at the moment. Second thing, economic impact, absolutely, no question. It's definitely getting better. But you've got a particular situation with a problem with damage to the park, really serious damage. The other thing is that over the last 10 years, the Hill Tribe people have learned to speak Vietnamese. They can now speak Vietnamese. Previously, spoke their own language, and that was about it. So that's really changed, and that's really made a big difference. So people are moving out of Sapa as well as people moving in. So there's this big churn going on in terms of population. Sapa town has gone bananas. You wouldn't recognize it. I mean, just in the last couple of years, it's just absolutely spectacular, the change that's gone on. And it's resulting in all kinds of problems, especially sewage and water systems are really badly overloaded and not working. They weren't working well before, but now they're really not working well. Park and landscape change, increased timber cutting, cardamom production and forest clearing, erosional impacts, absolutely, they're really serious. There's a lack of maintenance going on up there because everything's been focused on serving the actual sky ride. What you've done is they've closed protected areas, and what it's done is concentrate the use in other areas, right? So we weren't even allowed to go into the nature reserve, which we wanted to go into, because it's protected. No one's allowed in there. So we had to go down through this catastrophically damaged landscape, which had been torn up by water buffaloes, illegal logging, and dead cardamom, right? So it was not a very happy experience. So climate change, evidence of apparent climate change. I'll have to be clear that I can't prove any of this in that particular case. Drying out, that's really serious. The drying out of the vegetation, frost damage and shrub understory damaged, and the streams at the top have dried up. There's no streams anymore. It used to be water rushing down the place all over the place. Now it's all gone. So very, 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 very troubling. And is there anything you can do about it? Not really. Dang. Okay. Okay. However, meanwhile, back out there, you've still got the cloud forest. It's still there, and lots of it. It hasn't been totally destroyed. It's still out there. This particular area was severely damaged, but one of the things, if you want to look on the bright side as much as you can say, well, we've now got a basis for comparison between that kind of impact and what's happening in terms of areas which are not impacted. You've got this spectacular, mystical landscape still surviving all through much of the park, but not in that particular area. Okay, after this was all done, we were going to go up to 5 fingers. 5 fingers is the peaks you see in the background up there. We weren't going to climb them, right? But I had a broken rib. One of the other botanists from UBC had a badly twisted ankle. There was a number of different injuries in the group which prevented us even thinking about going up to something this steep. Because going up here, this was really, this beyond hairy. It's even way worse than the other one, right? But this is the place where there is no recorded evidence of what is in there in terms of plants. So it's a unique place. It's kind of Shangri-La for plant collectors. Most people have never been up there. So we looked longingly at it, but we're in no shape to go anywhere and enjoy it. So we didn't. We just looked. And that's about it, folks. So thank you very much for listening. I'll answer any questions. So if you need to go to Vietnam, I can recommend some other places that are still in better shape. Cuc Phuong National Park was fun, right? So the largest spider, it was so big we called it Mr. Spider. It was like this big around. Pretty cool. That's it. Any other questions or anything? Yes.
Birds, bugs, insects, things like, did you encounter all the same kind of thing you would if you were looking?
Oh, no, Jeff never went there.
Different kind of birds. I'm just in the photos, I didn't see, you know.
Now, why would that be? I can't go into everything about it, but one of the things is the Black Hmong have flintlock rifles.
Aha.
Okay? And they're really good shots. They are really good, okay? And they've killed just about everything.
Well, we were thinking, where was we were looking, we didn't notice that type
That's
of
right.
normal thing. You would see it in the photo. Mm-hmm.
Okay, when you actually go across to the other side and go down the slope where there isn't a lot of hill tribe access, it's got lots of birds. It's got monkeys, all kinds of stuff, right?
Monkeys and
Yeah, no problem. However, on this side they have guns. Now, what we did a few years ago when the director came across to visit us here, we said, you know, there's a real problem with people shooting everything, right? So we nodded. Yes, right. We went back and confiscated everyone's gun. This is Vietnam, right? So we just took all the guns away. When I went back, the last time I went back, several years ago, I noticed new guns. And you could tell because they were blued. They developed new ones, and they're all covered with this blue finish that you get on a new gun. They've restocked. In the meantime, in the couple of years before there was a lot of guns around, they had all kinds of different birds showing up and so on. But when I went back this time, maybe it's the time of the year, there wasn't many around. We did hear a few. When we went to Yai, the other place we went to, we heard several birds, and we saw squirrels, and we think we saw a couple of monkeys. Yeah. But in this area?
interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, there we are. Anyone else? Thanks a lot. Okay. And if anyone wants a copy of this.